This Week in Radio Tech, episode 188, is brought to you by the Telos VX multi-studio talk show system. Telos VX is the first and only multi-studio talk show system designed for radio and TV broadcast production. Improved audio quality and cost savings from day one. On the web at telos-systems.com/VX.
And now, our feature presentation.
TWiRT.
From towers in Wyoming to dashboards in Detroit, Shane Toven is keeping Wyoming Public Media at the forefront of content delivery.
All right, calm down. He says that to everyone.
This calls for immediate discussion.
What's up, Dad?
All your days are belong to us.
From his palatial office of important business,
or in a choice hotel in a distant land,
this is Kirk Harnack.
Shane Toven of Wyoming Public Media is in Detroit and joins Chris Tobin and me from the Radio Inc. Dash Conference.
You're dialed in to This Week in Radio Tech.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Kirk Harnack, and this is This Week in Radio Tech. It's our weekly podcast about broadcast engineering, focusing on audio, radio. But, you know, with radio technology, there's so much more besides just the audio. There's the RF world, there's towers, there's guy wires, there's tensioning, there's emergency activation, EAS systems. Oh, my gosh. We got to do a show about the stylus on the turntable, because I always say we do everything from the stylus on the turntable to the top of the tower. So we got a great show for you this time. A guy that I've wanted to have on the show for a long time. I've thought about him for just never got around to asking him. Shane Toven is our guest, so he's coming up in just a minute. First, I want to bring in our usual reliable co-host, and that's the best dressed engineer in radio. It's Chris Tobin, live in studio. Hey, Chris.
Hello there. Yes, I'm playing it safe. I'm here in the GFQ Network Control Center and having a good time. We're trying out some new things. As you can see, there's a new microphone in front of me. Not the Samsung, it's a Shure SM7.
Oh.
There are some people that have opinions that this microphone is pathetic and shouldn't be used for this type of application. Those of you
that's silly.
Those of you know who you are out there. I'm not going to say your names.
That's silly.
But maybe I'll give you your GFQ viewer number out instead. No, I'm only kidding.
You know, I don't know how. Tell you what, let's go ahead and introduce Shane Toven.
Yes,
He's our guest on the show. Shane, coming into us from a hotel room in Detroit, Michigan. Hey, Shane.
Greetings. I've just finished attending the first ever Dash Connected Car Audiotainment Conference, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that later in the show. But we'll also be talking about all of the usual engineering-related stuff. This is a topic that is kind of coming down the pipeline, and even as engineers, we should be paying attention because, well, let's face it, we all like gadgets. We all like looking at the latest and greatest, and there's certainly a lot of that coming down the pipe in our cars these days. So.
Hey, folks who are regular viewers or listeners to This Week in Radio Tech know that I work for the guys at the Telos Alliance. I'm the VP at the Telos Systems Division. And also, I'm part owner of some radio stations. As I say, I own the part that doesn't make any money, and that's why I work for Telos. So I do get to keep my hands dirty with engineering. In fact, just a week and a half ago, I was climbing towers, and actually, towers too. I was climbing 2 towers and moving a whole radio station. Chris Tobin, on the other hand, he stays very clean.
Well, actually, I do work with folks on a contractual basis in radio transmitter rooms and studios, so I'm dabbling. I keep dabbling. I don't own any radio stations or anything like that make no money.
Thank goodness. I mean, thank goodness for you that you don't.
I don't know. I've been able to make money with things that supposedly are no good, so who knows?
Well, good for you. And so Shane Toven, tell us about yourself. I met you, Shane, it seems like in Minnesota. Was that where I met you?
We did in fact meet in Minnesota. I've been in broadcasting now for, oh my goodness, going on 20 years now. It seems like just yesterday, but I started at
No way, you seem like you're 30 years old.
I'm turning 35 this year, and I started at the tender young age of 15 at KAXEF in Grand Rapids.
Child
Minnesota.
abuse.
I went into this willingly. I don't know what possessed me to do that. I should probably have my head examined. But
Now, Shane, I follow you on Facebook, and I see you supplying pictures of the most interesting places from, seems like snow plows and 4-wheel drive trucks and tower sites, and you're climbing stuff and you're building studios. I mean, you're kind of like living the manly engineer's dream. What do you do every day with Wyoming Radio? That's where you're with, right? Wyoming Public Radio.
Wyoming Public Media, yeah. We operate we operate three different services, classical, jazz, and then our main channel. We've got 30-some signals around the state of Wyoming. It's myself and two other engineers. We maintain the entire network for the university. And, boy, on a daily basis, it could be anything. It could be anything from the microphone all the way out to the antenna. Not that long ago, actually, last week, I finished building a construction permit up near KC, Wyoming. And it was the very first one where we had actually climbed a tower this large. It's a cell site, a big freestanding tower. So it was an adventure for all of us, myself and my two guys. We got certified to climb, and it was it was an interesting experience.
Actually, climbing is something I want to ask you about, because a lot of engineers, when I was doing contract engineering on a full-time basis, I was climbing a lot of towers. I don't know if I should have been or not. I always felt very comfortable climbing towers. I don't know that I had the best safety equipment, but I always had equipment that I was comfortable with. Safety hook. I mean, I would often free climb, but when I felt the least bit tired, or if I felt like, that wasn't quite a good step, let me rest for a second, I would lash around the tower and tie off and relax for a while. And I never really felt uncomfortable climbing a tower, but I may not have been the best judge of did I know what I was doing or not. So why don't you spend a couple minutes and take us through, what does a guy like yourself, what's your motivation to climb and not leave this to, shall I say, the professionals, the tower crews that do this on a full-time basis? What makes you think you can do this, and how is it that your employer and your wife are okay with this?
Well, the biggest motivation for us was a couple of things. First of all, it was time. I mean, oftentimes we just don't have the time to get a tower crew into a site. I mean, when we need to get something back up and running, I mean, this is Wyoming. I mean, you're not just going to call up a tower crew and have them there the next day. It just doesn't happen. So we took the opportunity as an engineering staff to get certified. There are a number of companies out there. A couple of companies come to mind. There's ComTrain is one of them, and the one that I went through was a company down in Colorado by the name of Safety One. They trained me to actually train my guys to climb towers. That's one of the key things, is being able to do it safely, know what the rules are, know what the appropriate safety equipment is. Like I said, I think you hit on a good point. You can be comfortable about it, but you never want to get so comfortable that you're operating in an unsafe manner. You always have to have a very healthy awareness of the situations that you're getting yourself into, and I guess that's a big part of it right there. So.
Yeah, like so many things in life, we learn by doing, and we learn what is normal and what is not normal by doing it repetitively. And if we don't die in learning, what to do, then we can get better and better at our craft. But you did go through this professional training. Can you tell us a little about what's that course like? A day or two or 10, or you're climbing towers? Is it some groundwork, studying? What's it like?
Well, it's a mixture, actually. The basic course is 8 hours for just to certify a person in climbing. The training course, the train the trainer course, was actually several days worth of training, and it did involve a lot of work on the ground. While we were being trained, we never actually went very high on a tower structure. We actually did it all indoors, and they had some tower structures set up in a large warehouse, and we were supervised by qualified climbers, and always tied off 100% with kind of passive restraint that would capture us on a safety rope if we were to slip and fall or something like that while we were in the process of training. So it can be a pretty intensive process, but under certain circumstances, it can be. It's definitely worth it. But that's something that you're right. A lot of employers probably would not train their guys to do it unless it was something that they felt was justified. And in our particular situation, when we have a big enough network, and it's the kind of environment where it was worthwhile to take this training and to do this. And quite frankly, I find it a lot of fun. So
I know I still do too. I climbed about a week ago with my radio stations in Mississippi, and I think the highest I was up was 60 feet, but I've climbed 600 feet before. So what? Not that that's a marker of anything in particular, because once you're over 40, 50 feet up, you're gonna things will be bad if you fall off anyway. Doesn't matter if it's 60 or 600 feet. How high are you typically climbing in your job?
Well, most of our towers are under 200 feet. So, and I have yet to climb to the very top of one of the 200-foot towers. But the one that we were just working on was about 100 feet tall. And our antenna was centered at 70 feet. It had a work platform at 40 feet. And 40 feet doesn't sound like a whole lot, but once you get up there and you look out over the edge of that work platform, you realize 40 feet's still pretty high in the air. So...
That's 4 stories, yeah. People die jumping off balconies trying to hit the swimming pool from the resort,
what's the most disconcerting part of tower climbing is when you're on a tower and it's windy, and the wind is whipping through the structure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You get the howling, that sound. I don't even know what to call it. I was up 220 feet on a tower putting in a Yagi, an RPU, and I'll never forget that. I'm just up there working. I'm like, what is that sound? And I realized, oh, it's the wind going between the trellis, the lattice of the tower. It was a 3-foot wide tower. I was like, oh my goodness, it was the strangest sound I ever heard in my life. But
Speaking of it,
you're just like, okay, I'm working on one thing. You have to get over the fact that you let your hands go, so you're not hanging, but secured by your belt and harness, and hope that everything goes right. So you got to get past that, and then you hear the sound. You're like looking around, going, "What the devil is that?" Oh yeah, it's the wind.
It can really.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it can really kind of psych you out once you, when you first get up there. I mean, the tower, depending on how it's constructed, may be wiggling a little bit and how windy it is.
Oh, I love that wiggle. I've been up the tower with some folks who have done it for the first time. They're like, what's going on? I'm like, what's the matter? Something's moving. Yes, it's the tower. What? It has to give a little bit. It can't be that rigid.
I gotta tell you guys. Well, maybe we can compare a couple stories here. I didn't mean this to be the tower climbing episode, and it won't be, because we're going to get to this Dash conference. I'm terribly interested in learning what they're saying about the Dash, because that is not necessarily the future of radio, but is a very important factor in radio, that we can keep broadcast radio on the dashboard and interesting and convenient and low friction for people to listen to. But here's when I first started climbing, the first time I ever had to climb a tower, I was in a little town in Kentucky, and I'll think of the name of it in just a minute. But it was a little auxiliary tower that the station had. It must have been a 40-foot Roan 25 with one set of guy wires on it, and all this tower did was hold a big, like, television Yagi antenna that pointed at some other town to pick up at that time the EBS station, whatever they were supposed to listen to. I think there was probably an RPU antenna, a whip antenna on the top of it. But they weren't picking up the EBS station that they were assigned to listen to, whatever, the LP1 or something. And with the naked eye, I could look up there and I could see that the problem was, there's 75 ohm, RG59 or RG6 coax going up the tower, and it went into that little balun, a little from twin lead to 75 ohm, and I could see one side of the twin lead was broken off. I could see it from the ground, and I thought, well, if I just get up there and fix that, or put a new balun up there, then it'll solve the problem. And I thought, to call a tower crew, first of all, I was really new in engineering. I didn't know who to call. I knew a tower guy some distance away. I thought, well, that's going to cost a lot of money. But if I could just climb up there and fix that, then the problem will be solved. So I don't even know that I had a belt of any kind. I don't think I did. So I climbed about halfway up the tower, and I got scared. And I thought, I got to come down. So I came down. And I looked at that tower and I thought, it's not very tall, and somebody's climbed it before. Obviously, somebody put it up there. Somebody put the antenna up there and put this coax up there. This is doable. This is freaking doable. And so I got up my nerve again, and I climbed back up, and I got about 3/4 of the way up the tower. And I thought, oh man, I can't do this. So I scampered back down, and so I'm walking around, pacing on the ground, thinking, I was probably saying some bad words. Come on, Kirk, you got to be able to do this. This is ridiculous that you can't do this. Somebody else did this. You can do it too. And so I don't care. I've kind of got this attitude, like, I don't care if it hair lips the governor. I'm going to climb this tower. And so I finally made it up, all for this tower and got up there with my tools. I don't know if I wrapped an arm around the thing or what, but somehow, without a belt, I stripped the wire, I reconnected to the little thumb screw up, scampered back down, came back down, and the EBS, the LP1 receiver worked fine, and it was all, aha, I can climb 40 feet up. So that was my first experience, and after that, it got better. I climbed a couple of other towers here and there, short jobs. And then all of a sudden I got involved with a really tall job, like 600 feet. So I climbed up with some tower guys. And then after that, it was no problem. I was changing light bulbs in the top of 400-foot towers and tossing the old bulb down. That's always a fun thing to do. So that was how I got started with climbing towers. Shane, did you have any kind of first experiences that were stop and go like I did?
It's never really freaked me out. I mean, from the moment I got on a tower after I'd been trained, and had the harness on and was clipping off, it really didn't scare me all that much. I admit the first time I stepped off onto that, onto that platform on this really big tower, it did kind of freak me out just a little bit. But you just have to kind of gather your wits about you. Go, okay, I'm going to trust my safety gear. I've been trained to do this, and just get over it. It's. It can be easier said than done. In fact, one of the scenarios that they mentioned in our training class was how to rescue on a tower. And one of the rescue scenarios is if somebody freezes on a tower. Yeah, you might have to send somebody else up to go and rescue them.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that? What do you say to somebody? How do you help them down?
Well, in some cases, you literally have to go up there on a rescue line that's been pre-rigged and clip them in on your harness and bring them down. I mean, sometimes you can talk them out of it, but sometimes it's just they're just frozen. They're just frozen. It might as well be a medical emergency. So.
Yeah. Chris, did you ever have any harrowing experiences that you kind of thought, I don't know if I should climb anymore?
Yes. Let's see, I'm trying to remember. This was a 3-tower AM directional. We're on top of a hill. We started late afternoon. We were fixing the obstruction beacon. And as we're working, I'm looking out into the horizon, noticing that the bright blue sky and sunlight that we had was suddenly diminishing. And I look at my watch and say, wait a minute, it's summertime. Sunset isn't until about 8 o'clock p.m. And it's only 3 in the afternoon, and the level of light is dropping quickly. Oh, no, it's a summer storm rolling in. And sure as I'm thinking and putting that, the thought process is spinning, you're trying to get everything going, you're turning the glass lens, you're tightening everything in, you look out at the horizon, you see these little flashes of light, and you go, oh, look, how nice, lightning. And I'm on a Ben Franklin rod. I'm on a 410-foot tower, about a quarter of the way up, or half, just under half, and I'm going to be part of a metal structure that's probably going to get some kind of corona discharge. Oh, that's right, I'm on an AM tower. It's insulated from the ground. Oh, wow. Oh. I've got to get down and off this thing real fast. And then what's even more fun, this particular tower had a folded unipole. So so part of the tower was grounded, the other part had the wire for the unipole. So if I was between the tower and the wire, there's a good chance I probably would have felt some real interesting static, or my hair would probably have gone up. So yeah, we got down real quick. I called on the radio to the guys on the ground and said, hey, storm's rolling in, you may not see or hear anything, but we're coming down fast. And I just, dropped down the bucket of tools, and that was it. And that was a fun one.
Seems like nowadays, the most employed broadcast engineers and contract engineers, most of us are in a position where the corporate policy is you hire a tower crew. You don't climb the tower.
Well, yeah, that's for liability.
Isn't that the norm nowadays?
That actually has always been the norm. It's just that in the early days, I think
I didn't know that.
People were more forgiving, or realized, hey, you're being responsible. I did the training. I did the whole bit, and we made sure I always had 2 people, and we did everything you're supposed to do. But later years, a lot of corporate folks that I worked with, they just mandated, and that was it. Just the same thing when we used to do transmitter work. The corporate mandate was 2 people at the transmitter building, regardless whether the person knew how to work a transmitter or not. Their job was to pull you off the high voltage, make the phone call, all that kind of stuff. And it makes total sense, because if over the years you've read articles in various trades about general managers who decided to fix their own transmitters at their radio stations, and
or even qualified engineers. A person who I know, didn't know him well, but I met him a couple times in Mississippi. Died at the hands of an FM transmitter in Greenville, Mississippi, And
that's true. I have known people to get injured. I haven't met anyone who's killed, working at a transmitter site, but I have met folks who were injured because of that. And I know for years I've always practiced two-man or two-person team. And if I was forced not to have a second person, then in my procedures I had at the radio station where the studio would call the transmitter site every 20 minutes. And it worked pretty well. But that was in the days before webcams and everything else. So it was a good procedure.
So Shane, at Wyoming Public Media, you guys have 3 engineers covering a lot of ground. What do you do about a buddy system there?
We do, and there are a lot of cases where engineers, at least it's usually me that goes out into the field, and my other 2 guys have their hands full pretty much at the studios. But when it's a larger project, I do bring one, or sometimes in the case of this tower project, we were all 3 out in the field, which left the studio. Well, it was pretty much remote access only if we needed to do something back at the studio at that point. It's a challenge. It is a real challenge. But we have similar practices in terms of if there is a single guy, like myself, just out at a site by myself, we check in on a regular basis, and if they don't hear from me, they send help. So to the last known location where I was. So.
Yeah. So we've been talking about Shane, your job in Wyoming and the big place. By the way, I almost ended up owning a radio station or buying a construction permit in Laramie, Wyoming. Do you guys have any facilities in Laramie?
Oh yeah, that's where we're based. Actually, that's where the studios are at the University of Wyoming, and we actually have 3 signals on the air in Laramie: KUWR, our 100 kilowatt flagship blowtorch. KUWL and KUWY, that's our classical and our jazz and our classical stations in Laramie, flagships for those. They're a little bit lower in power. So,
wow, what a big state! My goodness. So, we talked about what you do at the transmitter sites. You said that the guys that work with you are mostly doing the studio stuff. What do you guys do at Wyoming Public Media that's interesting or off the wall or a bit out of the norm in terms of what the activities at the studios or the facilities?
Well, like I said, we have 3 program streams going out, which I know for a lot of commercial broadcasters, that's nothing. They've got sometimes 4 or 5 stations or more in a cluster. But the difference is we feed those 3 program streams across 30 some odd signals across the state of Wyoming, and our distribution is all via satellite. You can imagine with all the satellite feeds coming into our studios and going out of our studios, and microwave and 950 STLs, various other things. The routing and everything gets kind of unwieldy in a hurry. So we rely a lot on audio over IP at our plant. In fact, we're an Axia shop. So we just migrated to that probably about 3 years ago.
I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
Yep. Prior to that, it was all analog. We had a 32 by 32 Leach crosspoint audio router. And once that started failing, we kind of pulled the trigger and decided to migrate everything over to audio over IP. After we'd been playing with it for a little bit, we started out with just the one. Actually, it was an element service, just kind of to get our feet wet in the technology. A couple of nodes. We were just kind of playing around and evaluating the system. And I'd worked with it at Minnesota Public Radio prior to coming out here, so looked like it could be a really good fit. And then when they announced the Radius consoles, I said, I'll take 4, and that filled out the rest of our studios. So we've been Axia ever since, and that's really been good.
Now you mentioned satellite distribution, and that's kind of interesting. A couple shows back we had Mitch Glider from Westwood One on the show, and obviously they do a lot of satellite uplinking there in New York. But on a statewide basis, tell me a couple details about your satellite distribution. What is it, C or KU band, and what kind of problems do you have with snow? And what kind of coding and bit rate are you guys using to get the best quality you can afford of audio to all your transmitter sites?
Sure, we actually use KU band distribution. It's a 500 kilohertz audio, or it's a 500 kilohertz RF channel on the transponder, and we're transmitting all 3 audio channels on that. We use IP encapsulated over DVB actually. It's a system from International Data Casting, who I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with from Westwood One. That's the same technology they use. It's the same technology NPR uses. So it made sense for us as well. And we're running, like I said, we're running AAC audio on our 3 channels. We run those at 96 kilobits per channel, which actually sounds surprisingly good. We do some codec preconditioning with some hardware. It's kind of legacy hardware now. It's the Harris New Stars. I don't know if you guys remember those or not.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
But they actually work really well for this application, and we just put them in place and have left them there ever since. So they sound really good on our uplink chain. 96K. Even after going through the HD codec, it seems to play really nicely with the HD codec, too.
Well, that's interesting that you say that. I'm curious about what happens. Okay, so you receive the audio at the transmitter sites. Now, by the way, at your transmitter sites or wherever you're receiving this, I'm curious. Are your KU band dishes, are they kind of flipped over such that the feed is up high and the dish is sitting kind of near vertical, or are they tilted back and collect snow?
No, these are actually offset feed dishes. I mean, so the angle on the dishes is a little bit shallower than one that's got kind of a prime focus, a center feed.
Yeah.
But the snow actually tends to blow clear from most of our dishes. We do have covers on some of them, but I've found that the covers, as they've started to deteriorate, have been more of an issue than anything. A couple of our dishes have got heaters on them, and I'm ultimately planning to roll out more heaters to dishes. But one of the primary defenses against satellite audio outage is just having IP audio backups at the sites. So,
oh, yeah. You can send the same stream, I guess, that way.
In fact, we have the Wyoming PBS network, which is a separate organization from us, but we share a lot of sites with them, a lot of transmitter sites with them. They have an OC3 microwave going across the state, 155 megabits, all the way from our studios in Laramie clear to the middle of the state. We send LiveWire Axia audio over that network.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
we have Omnia One processors at some of our sites, and what they'll do is they'll actually automatically fail over from the primary audio feed coming from the satellite receiver to a LiveWire feed coming, oddly enough, up a 950 STL shot to our transmitter site in Laramie, where it meets up with that microwave network, and then there are a couple of LiveWire nodes up there, which we use as an audio router at that site. So those Omnia One processors out at the far sites, they just pick off the LiveWire traffic from our site out of Laramie.
Someday bandwidth is going to be so cheap and ubiquitous that codecs will barely be necessary. And we see, not a lot yet, but we see some application where people are sending uncoded, linear audio over IP typically from one place to another. We did an experiment in Cleveland, Ohio a few months back where some international piano competition was going on. And they used existing, but fairly new, but existing infrastructure to send LiveWire linear, and it wouldn't have to be LiveWire. Anybody's linear IP audio would go across this. And we know that there are a bunch of channels between New York and DC that are linear IP audio, and as bandwidth just gets cheaper and cheaper, there's less and less need for audio to be coded. Just as we've found in the world of automation systems back in the mid '90s when I worked for Scott Studios, coding technology was cheaper than hard drive technology. And now, of course, it's the other way around. Hard drive technology is cheaper than coding technology. So you might as well store your audio linear on hard drives. Anyway, I digress from all that. That's really interesting. I'm fascinated that you guys find that 96 kilobits AAC provides you with the audio quality that you and your listeners would be looking for.
Sure. Well, I mean, satellite bandwidth is fairly expensive. I think we pay something, oh man, I can't even remember what it is, but it's in the 4 figures per month that we pay for our KU satellite bandwidth to our sites. So we have to make as efficient use of that as possible. And 96 kilobits seem to be kind of the trade-off, and that still leaves us a little bit of bandwidth for transferring files to the sites for playback. These same satellite receivers also will insert a local station ID for us at the top of every hour.
Yeah. Can you do regionalized weather forecasts?
We can. In fact, that's one thing we're talking about rolling out right now, actually. So that'll be the next logical step for us.
So what's Wyoming Public Media doing then with, you mentioned HD radio. So what are you sending, or what's your setup there for HD?
Well, Right now, as I mentioned, we have 3 networks. We have our main channel, and then we have the classical, and we have the jazz. And we have the classical and the jazz on HD2 and HD3 at a number of our sites. And that, for us, has been the best way to expand that service across the state, since analog channels are somewhat in short supply these days on the FM band. So,
fascinating. I always wonder how well coded audio plays with the HD coding. And they say that coding of different types tends to be better than coding of the same type over and over, cascading. A lot of broadcasters choose to use aptX coding for their infrastructure because they know it's going to be coded something else, some MPEG codec for the consumer level. So that's interesting that you're finding that it's acceptable the way you're doing it.
Well, the cascading chain for us would be primarily layer 2 as it comes into us or as it's stored on our automation system. I mean, we ultimately plan to upgrade the automation to linear as well, but that's a little ways down the road here. So layer 2 to AAC and then to HDC, and I would have thought that it would be just absolutely mangled by that point, but it's actually been pretty decent.
What's your data rate you set for the MPEG 2?
MPEG layer 2, typically 256.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, that helps a lot.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
Yeah. So.
Hey, folks, you are watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode number 188. I'm Kirk Harnack, along with Chris Tobin in New York, and our guest is Shane Toven. He is in charge. Shane, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the return video. What's your title there at Wyoming Public Media?
It depends on who you ask. I mean, the title that I was unofficially given was Director of Engineering. It's by my previous boss. That's probably the closest thing that describes what I do. But like I said, there's an engineering staff of 3. I oversee the other 2 guys, and pretty much all other things related to engineering at the station. So.
Engineering Grand Poobah at Wyoming
Something
Public
like,
Media.
yeah.
Shane Toven. Now we're gonna chat for just a second about our sponsor of the show, and then after that we're gonna talk about the conference that you're at, this Dash conference that Radio Inc. magazine is putting on. I suppose at least they're the primary sponsor of it, and I want to find out what you're finding out about the future of the automobile dashboard. This has worried me a lot for several years, so we'll get to that in a minute. Right now, I want to chat with you about the Telos VX phone system. This is where IP meets the studio, where telephony meets IP, or IP meets telephony, and it all mixes together to provide a fantastic experience putting callers on the air, putting select callers or users of cell phone apps on the air, and we have a future bridge to future codecs, such as AMR wideband, that the cell phone companies are going to be rolling out. In fact, T-Mobile already has rolled out. The Telos VX phone system is it's a 2-rack unit box. It's based on the Telos fanless engine. It's a very solid. There's no fan in it. Big heat sinks, dual redundant power supplies, dual Ethernet ports, and it's running a real-time version of Linux that is able to process multiple SIP calls, process the audio, in other words, do omnia processing on those multiple phone lines, they're virtual phone lines, if you will, voice over IP, SIP calls, and do many channels of live wire audio in and out. Then we can group hybrids into shows. So we can have in the VX engine, we can have a bunch of virtual hybrids, if you will. In fact, each SIP line gets its own hybrid in the VX world. We can group these into shows. So you might have a show with 8 listener caller lines and let's say 3 hotlines or VIP lines and then a hotline. So you can have you can arrange this any way you like to. You can also have lines ring in multiple studios, so a hotline or a warm line or a pizza guy at the front door line, all ring in multiple studios, or general manager line, if you will. And one of the great things about the Telos VX is that because it's using SIP, session initiation protocol, that's the most popular protocol for voice over IP, because it's doing that, and because we're handling this audio in the VX engine, we can do Omnia audio processing on every single phone call. And so the call-to-call consistency is just amazing. The level, of course, is just spot on, call after call after call. But we also can do automatic EQ on the low end and the high end to get the calls sounding as much as possible similar from call to call to call. There's something else about the VX. If you're using it in a television environment or in an environment where any environment where you have open speakers and open microphones, we're using Fraunhofer's acoustic echo cancellation in the VX engine. And this is optional. You can turn it on or leave it off if you don't need it. And this makes it possible to have open mic, open speakers in the same studio, television studio, radio studio, and carrying on perfectly natural conversation with the caller. You don't have any echo, you don't have any feedback buildup, none of that stuff. Of course, the hybrids that are VX do all the cool things Telos hybrids do, including the automatic pitch shift that we send to the caller. Not noticeable at all, but man, it stops the feedback. And then there's another thing about the VX, and that is the VSET phone that you use to control it. Actually, there's several ways to control the VX. One is with a call controller module that can be part of an Axia Element audio console. There are also telephone modules built into the Axia IQ console in the expansion module. It can also be controlled by software, not only the VX producer software from Telos, but also third-party software from Neo and from Broadcast Bionics and also from Arctic Palm. Maybe you like their software, the guys from Canada. So there's different ways to control and take and screen the calls, and it all works into an ecosystem that is really homogeneous and works very, very well. You also have the possibility of setting up your own asterisk server, and that means that you can take a phone app on an Apple, an iOS device or an Android device, and use a G.722 telephone app to make a 7 kilohertz phone call right into one of the phone lines. It'll ring right in on a line on a VSET. You take that phone call, and you're communicating with 7 kilohertz of audio from the caller to you and from you to the caller. This makes it possible to have good-sounding remotes just pop up instantly anywhere. Breaking news stories, traffic, weather. Maybe your weather guy is off-site, and he can call in with an app like that. It's really, really interesting, and there's a future there for further codecs as various phone carriers bring new codecs online, like AMR wideband coming out. So watch this space, and if you're looking to get a multiple line phone system for 1, 2, or 5 studios at your broadcast center, you ought to check out the Telos VX phone system. If you have Axia consoles, it just slips right in. I mean, it's easy. If you don't have Axia consoles, then you use our nodes, Axia nodes, to convert the LiveWire audio from the VX engine into analog or AES for use by your console. Either way, it's a good value. Check it out online at telos-systems.com/VX. Join the over 250 broadcasters that now have a VX system online. All right. Hey, you're watching This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host, along with Chris Tobin in studio at our broadcast center at the GFQ Network in Queens, New York. And our guest coming to us from Detroit is Shane Toven, the Director of Engineering for Wyoming Public Media. All right, Shane, you're at this DASH conference, and I got plenty of emails from Eric and Ed at Radio Inc. about this conference, and I really wanted to go, but my wife says, no, we're going to Florida, and we're going to Disney, and we're going to Universal with the kids. Okay, fine, no problem. So I'm glad you're there. Tell us about the DASH conference, and what do you kind of set it up for us.
Well, this is really kind of a unique conference. The whole idea of this really started at the NAB radio show with a presentation that talked about this topic, where dashboards in cars are becoming more and more advanced, where you used to have, a volume knob, a tuning knob, power, and a readout of the frequency you were tuned to, maybe some presets. Now you've got these giant LCDs in there that are controlling everything from the radio to your climate controls and just your entire environment in the car. Well, the question then becomes, as listeners have more and more options in their car, everything from Pandora to iHeartRadio to MP3s, whatever. Where is radio's place on that dashboard, and how do we how do we integrate? How do we maintain that place on the dashboard? So the idea was floated to form this conference, this Dash conference, to bring together not only broadcasters, but auto manufacturers and app developers and a number of other parties who kind of bring something to the table in this discussion. And it's really been an interesting couple days of discussion. I'm not sure that it, at some points it almost brought up more questions than it answered, but it was a really good discussion for the last couple of days.
What do you feel is the mood amongst broadcasters? Are broadcasters still optimistic? Are they whistling past the graveyard? Do terrestrial broadcasters have a real chance of having a solid position on the modern dashboard? Now, and okay, I know it's a ton of questions. Here in Florida, on our vacation, I'm renting a, it's like your granddad's car. I'm renting a Buick LaCrosse. And it's actually, it's pretty nice. It's got, leather interior and all that. It does have a big honking LCD display. It does not have navigation. I guess it's a rental car. I guess they want you to, buy the Hertz Never Lost. But the radio readout is I wouldn't say beautiful, but it's more than adequate. Looks good. And it certainly reads out title and artist on stations that are doing that. Oh, you know what? I don't think it's HD. It's not an HD radio. It's just an AM/FM. Anyway, it looks good. It's not competing with any apps. It's AM/FM. So what are broadcasters thinking about their future, and are they whistling past the graveyard on this issue?
Well, I think your example there must be one of the kind of basic systems. There are about 3 tiers of systems that they have. The one that you described just kind of starts right at the bottom, where you maybe got an aux in where you can plug in your MP3 player, but not a lot of other connectivity beyond that point. And then you start getting into the systems that integrate, maybe even in newer cars, that integrate apps and integrate Bluetooth and integrate a number of other things. And most of those systems now are actually coming standard with HD, which kind of surprised me, actually. And a lot of that has to do with the nav systems and providing data for that and various other things. But as far as broadcasters go, it really depends. Some of them are kind of oblivious to this, it seems, and maybe just kind of burying their heads in the sand. But this is important. We really don't want to get passed by with this. The good news is that a lot of, in spite of all the choices that are available now in the car, the consumers are still turning to radio for the vast majority of content in their car. So.
Well, and by the way, this radio did have Bluetooth as well. I did hook my phone up to it, and I think I'm running the Google navigation voice through it, so I can find my way to Disney every day. What was I going to ask about that? Oh yeah, any talk about when will we actually see cars coming with 4G connectivity and maybe 6 months free or something, and then you re-up with whoever the provider is?
That was another thing that was discussed at this conference. The term that they were using is this the connected car. And that could take one of a couple of forms. Either that connectivity comes with a built-in modem in the car, or it comes through your smartphone. But we're going to see that. GM has already pretty much said it's going to be in every single car via an embedded modem. And as for the data plans, well, that was another good question that was brought up. And I'm not sure there was really a good answer in terms of how that's handled, whether it be included with the price of the car for so many months, or consumers are sensitive to that, and they're sensitive to price, and they're sensitive to data usage. So I guess that particular question is still kind of up in the air. But the one thing remains: the car will be connected, and it will be sending all sorts of data back to the manufacturer, back to a variety of other parties. So.
So is there any discussion about telematics and driver distraction?
Yes, absolutely. And that was another big thing that came up. The technologies in the car have to be simple to use and have to minimize driver distractions. One of the comments that was made was that radio kind of set the bar for ease of use. In other words, just turn it on and it's just there. These technologies really need to focus on maintaining that level of simplicity as they're rolled out in cars. And yeah, driver distraction was another big thing that was brought up. Again, no real concrete answers there. I mean, you've got the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration and other groups, who aren't legislating anything at this point, but it's certainly a very real possibility. I mean, distracted driving is something that people are really sensitive to. They showed a video at this conference where one woman who was in her connected car was actually, while she was driving, firing up the app to connect to the radio and doing all these things, and the poor the poor person in the car next to her, who was who was kind of conducting the interview, would just pull over if you need to, was just terrified to death. So it's a real issue.
Well, if you want to see distracted driving, take a commuter bus along the New Jersey Turnpike toward New York City, and then look down into the windshield of the motor vehicles on the Turnpike. Interesting things you will see. People reading the newspaper, women doing their hair, or makeup. It's fun. I mean, that alone is a video that should go on the internet. It's a great thing. It's a reality show. It's the next show.
One other thing that was brought up, as a tangent to this, was cars that are autonomous, and the fact that as autonomous vehicles become more common, or vehicles with features that allow the driver to focus less on driving. I'm not sure that's a good thing, but they mentioned that might be one solution to the distracted driving issue. If the vehicle has more features built in that will sense its own surroundings and sense what kind of environment it's in relation to other vehicles, and even in relation to transportation infrastructure like stoplights and various other road signals.
So basically a self-aware vehicle for autonomous driving. So instead of being in a Skylark 2000, it'll be the Skynet. Skynet 2000 from Buick.
Isn't this how Skynet started?
Well, how are the experiments with the Google cars? Any word as to where that's going? Because when we do have autonomous driving vehicles, and that's going to happen, you know it is. When we have that, well, that opens up all kinds of opportunities for entertainment in the car. Now we can, now radio will be competing with television in the car. And video games and everything else, and emails and who knows what all else. That day's going to come.
Yeah.
And any thoughts about that at the Dash conference?
Yeah, that's something that's still. I mean, it's going to get there, but that's something that's still a ways off. But for now, we're kind of in this mode where we have to deal with technologies in the car that the user has to interact with while they're driving. So again, simplicity becomes the key. They talked about things like voice interface versus touch screen. Voice interface is one of those things. I don't know if you've ever tried to use the voice interface in some of these cars, like Ford Sync and so on. I found them really frustrating. I mean, even Siri on my iPhone, I find difficult to ever understand what I'm trying to talk about sometimes. So.
Well, we engineers are often talking over others' heads or around the side anyway. So I don't
Does Siri understand?
I don't know if Siri can be expected to understand everything that we have to talk about.
Does she know the resistor color code?
So it sounds like we're going to continue to be in, I guess 2 decades from now, we're going to look back at these as the bad old days of driver distraction. Because in the future, at some point, when we all have Jetsons cars, it won't matter. Driver distraction will be, we'd rather have you distracted. Don't worry about us taking you there. The car's going to get you there. But yeah, for now, we've got to design systems that are low friction. It seems like they've got to design dashboards. Let's say you punch the Pandora app and you haven't logged in to it yet, or you want to change your login. Well, it can't ask you to log in while you're going 58 miles an hour down the highway.
No.
It's got to hold that off until, no, sorry, can't play anything for you until you pull over and stop.
Yeah. And that was another thing that came up. The initial setup and pairing of some of these systems was where the really difficult part came in. It seemed like a lot of them, once that part was done, they were fairly seamless. You poke the button and it just kind of went. So we're getting close to that point with ease of use.
Now, thinking about broadcasters, how's the conversation going about, let's say I want to listen to, let me make up a station, Kicks 106. And in West Undershirt, Arkansas. When I tune into Kicks 106 in West Undershirt, is it going to be possible for the radio to know whether it's in range or not of the broadcast signal, and maybe choose that. Or if it's not in range of the broadcast signal, maybe somehow to know that, hey, there's a stream for Kix 106, and here's the URI for that stream, and go stream it. Wouldn't that be interesting to be able to switch between streamed audio and broadcast audio? And at some point, when or if LTE 4G coverage is really, really good, I don't know that we'll ever have enough bandwidth there to cover, all the cars that we want to listen to different streams. But wouldn't it be interesting if we could switch automatically between the broadcast version and a stream version? Are we anywhere near that?
We're getting there as well. That's another thing that was discussed, was the seamless transition between various mediums. I mean, you want to listen to something, you just tell your radio, this is what I want to listen to. And the delivery platform at that point becomes irrelevant. It just pulls it from whatever source is available, whether that be terrestrial broadcast radio, whether that be internet, whether that be any number of possible sources now or in the future. Again, that's a point where, it's coming. I mean, as broadcasters, we're not really, well, radio is always going to be, RF is RF. We know that, whether it be broadcast radio, whether it be cellular. But the days of the broadcast transmitter being the exclusive mechanism for audio content, for broadcast audio content, are kind of numbered, I think.
Yeah, they've been numbered for a long time, actually.
They have. Yep.
Well, the RE Blaupunkt system back in the 80s was you can travel across the countryside in Europe, and it'll change from radio to radio station if you're all in the same network. Remember the early days?
Was that the RBDS, the alternate frequency tagging?
Yeah. The early days.
I got to experience that in France in the early 90s with a French broadcaster called Vibration in Orléans, France, and they had 13 transmitter sites, all reasonably low power, 500 to 1,000 watts. On various water towers across the central part of France in the Loire Valley, and we would drive around, and the thing would just automatically move to the strongest signal, and never lost it. We could drive around for hours and just keep the signal, and it was usually pretty good. Of course, the U.S. broadcasting model is quite different. We tend not to have a whole bunch of low power transmitters transmitting the same thing. We tend to have be the cowboys with the big 100 kilowatt signal somewhere. Although Wyoming Public Media, like other statewide type services, are do follow a bit more of the European model, don't they?
We do, yeah, and we have a lot of smaller transmitters around the state. The other challenge that you start getting into, though, with something like that is now you have to deal with delays, whether that be HD delay, whether that be streaming delay. And that could be kind of a nightmare if you're talking about a radio that's got to switch between those various audio sources. So I'm not quite sure how they get around that problem, although they're also talking about the possibility of radios that will just sit there and constantly cache content, so it kind of becomes like a radio TiVo. You're listening to anything you want, whenever you want to listen to it.
But then, on the one hand, the radio TiVo idea sounds pretty good. You make your own clock. Okay, I want to hear the songs that they have to play, but I want to make sure I hear the news at the top of the hour and traffic, twice an hour between 6:40 and 7:30 p.m. or a.m. But then you start to become your own program director. And hey, does my mom want to do that? No. She wants to cut the radio on. She wants to turn the radio on and hear what's on.
That's true. A lot of these things are generational. You've got the young generation where, one of the stories that was related at this conference was a guy who had his kids in the back seat. He turns on the car goes back to the last radio station that was tuned in, and the kids hear the last, 20 seconds of a song. They say, Dad, go back. And they want to hear the rest, they want to hear the song. Well, right now you can't do that.
Yeah.
But a day is coming where you could do that. I could actually even envision a radio that's constantly slurping up the entire RF band in a particular area and just gives you what you want, within, say, the last 30 minutes or whatever, on the FM band from that particular area. That's, that might be one approach.
If it was, as you put, slurping up all the RF, it would almost have to do all of its own encoding. What if it was actually slurping up, if you will, all the audio streams from stations in your area, plus additional stations that you may ask for? But let me ask this: we have these apps right now, like iHeartRadio, and you can listen to any Clear Channel station across the country. And I spent part of my life listening to WLW in Cincinnati and WHAS in Louisville, because when Gary Burbank worked at each one of them, I liked to listen to them. And I've pulled up the iHeartRadio app and I've checked it out, listened to a couple of local Clear Channel stations. Okay, it's what's on my local dial. And then I tune in WLW and I listen to the Trucker Show for 10 minutes. And okay, that's cool. I don't think I've been back. I haven't been back to any of the stations there. I guess what I'm getting at is, are we finding anything out about what people find compelling? Do people from Wyoming tune in to WLW in Cincinnati via the iHeartRadio app? We work hard to make our streams available everywhere on lots of platforms, from TuneIn to Stitcher to iHeartRadio. If you have an agreement with Clear Channel like Cumulus has had. But is all that effort worth it? Do you end up getting 14 people listening on iHeartRadio who are outside the Cincinnati market to WLW? What value are we finding in all this work?
Well, it's making it available to the consumers. I mean, our listeners are going to listen to what they want to listen to when they want to listen to it. Because that's just the kind of environment that we're in now. We're not in a media environment anymore where people are doing appointment listening, where they're tuning in to catch a particular show anymore. I think what's really important, though, is producing that compelling local content. Listeners form connections with those local DJs that they're familiar with. So maybe, if somebody's in Wyoming listening to WLW on the iHeartRadio app, it's probably because they have some kind of connection back to WLW and the personalities at that station. So I think that's really what's going to become important here. Content. And like I said, the delivery mechanism really doesn't matter. So we need to make it as easy and accessible for the listeners as possible.
Well, you said it, and content is so king. Chris, I'm sorry. I think I almost cut you off a couple of times. Do you have a comment?
No, you didn't cut me off. No, I would agree with Shane that content is the driving force behind it. I think the broadcast industry needs to wake up and realize that if it doesn't change its modus operandi, it's gonna fail miserably. iHeartRadio and all the others, radio.com and the other stuff. Someday somebody will realize and wake up that, as Shane pointed out, it's just a delivery mechanism. It shouldn't matter where you get it from. And then someday, the broadcasters will tell the investment bankers to step aside. Don't worry, we've got everything under control. You'll get your money back, and let's just pay attention to the business model. And then someday, broadcasters will realize that the content they produce that is compelling, as Shane pointed out, is where the money will be found. And right now, the only broadcasters that are benefiting from content that is compelling are the ones doing live news, sports, and compelling live talk. Everything else, from music included, is going nowhere fast. As you point out, Kirk, you could do TiVo radio, TiVo in the car, you do your music favorite, whatever. That's what happens now. It's like, what's the point? That's why I'll say the younger generation, those who did not grow up on traditional radio as we know it, don't get the fact that, what's the point of this? I can do this with my iPod. I can do this. And that's where people are missing the boat. And I've been to so many NAB conferences and sponsored events with the knucklehead researchers, and it's still the same thing comes out. Same stuff comes out every time. You got to do this, you got to do that, and nothing works. And yet people continue to believe, oh no, the future is this. And then, it's like, as Shane pointed out, you sit there going, okay, this is all well and good, but if it's not something people want to hear, all the technology in the world is not going to bring it to them. And you're not going to benefit, and then everything is that vicious cycle again where nobody makes money and they all walk away.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, the other place, the other place where these connections happen is in the event of emergencies. You're not going to get things like emergency information from something like Pandora or RDIO. That generally is only going to come from a local broadcaster who's there, who's got feet on the ground and knows what's going on. And those are the kind of connections that get formed with the listeners. There was another story told at the conference about a radio station that after 9/11, basically their morning show just spent the whole morning just connecting with their listeners and letting them talk about what was on their minds and how they were feeling. So.
Yeah, but the problem is today's environment, broadcasters in certain markets, certain size broadcast companies can't see the value in local programming, and therefore they find that it's not going to work. And then we have the infamous, hey, we had an ES alert go out over the air, and there was nobody there to correctly do it, and certain things have happened in our local community. We have no idea what the radio station didn't say anything about it. Oh, they come to find out the radio station's automated from some other place. And and it's just everybody just accepts it. An industry, I'm not saying listeners accept it. The industry just accepts that as the norm. That's the way it has to be. And then it's like, okay, well, you can't have it both ways. You're willing to do local, you will make money with local, but you have to be willing to do it right.
You really have to commit to it.
If you treat your programming like a jukebox and you program it like a jukebox, then you can expect that your competitors will be jukeboxes, and that'll be a jukebox will be your competitor. And when I say jukebox, I mean like the services like Pandora and RDO, and now iTunes Radio. And by the way, when iTunes Radio came out, I pay for iTunes Match every year. It got me a whole bunch of music cleaner than what I had myself. I thought, I really like classical cello pieces, and so I made a cello channel on iTunes Radio, or maybe I found one that was already there, and I spent about 2 days listening to it, and I started to realize that I was listening to about the same 27 cello pieces over and over again. Maybe there's just not that many, I don't know, but after about 2 days of listening to it, I thought, okay, I've had enough. Let me move on to something else. And I wonder how, and I've done the same thing with some Pandora channels. Okay, so I and my daughter Madeline, we'll make a Pandora channel and we'll listen to it, and it'll be fresh and good for a few hours, maybe even a couple of days, and then after that it's, this Frank Sinatra channel is really just kind of getting old because I think I heard that song 3 times today. So,
but that's how radio was in the early days. That's why radio stayed live. That's why radio constantly reinvented itself. Because for the human nature, that's what happens. When things become repetitive, the brain suddenly says, okay, that's it, we've cashed enough, we're going to move on to something else.
That was another one of the comments at the conference, is that we have to get out of this. We have to get back into the mode where we're really not afraid to take chances with innovative programming on the air. Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately, it's going to have to come down from the top, and if it's...
That top is real old, 65 plus, not happening. Not happening until they retire and they're out of the business.
Yep. Yeah.
I gave an example once. I was talking recently at a university with some students in a broadcast program, and I gave them an example. You have a radio station, has HD radio channels, HD sub-channels we'll call them, and for some odd reason, the broadcaster insists on putting some kind of alternate music on those channels. One of them was country music, and they claimed it was unique enough that it's worth it. Really? Okay. You never saw, I guess, something called the iPhone. And then there was the other channel, which was classic rock. It was all the old recordings of something that was done, blah blah blah, the whole bit. I was like, really? I guess again, you never saw this thing. So I said, why don't we try something else? Since we need to pay the electric bill and we need to really maybe find a way to introduce the community to the radio stations or extend our brand. I'll use the phrase that's used by marketers. What if we went out and sublet the HD channel to, say, the local college sporting programs, so that maybe at one certain time of the day, one particular college sports team is doing their finals, and another time of day, because it's a different league, they're a different time. And then what happens is you have these colleges, students, and families are buying into the HD component, and they're finding out their favorite college sport team that they support, because their kids are in it, is on a radio station that just so happens to be a popular station, their particular music they like. And all of a sudden now you've cross-pollinated between the two technologies, and you've grown extended. I sat there with several executives, with two programming people that totally bought into it, and like, that's a great idea. Because I had to present the technology side of how we make money off it. So I did an ROI, and it worked. And I got the look of like, I just poked their eyes out, or I sacrificed their firstborn. And they're like, no, you don't understand, that's not how it works. I was like, really? Okay. Your model right now doesn't make any money. The one I have brings in about, a good couple of bucks a month to pay the electric bill plus. So which one is the preferred? I had it all wrong. Apparently I didn't understand business. Yeah. and they went back to literally doing this stuff, and then they changed it to some kind of automated system, sort of like what Kirk, you were pointing out, where you were doing the Pandora, you make your playlist, and it was just a nightmare. And as I travel around the country, I hear the same thing. I'm going, what the devil is... So, Shane points out, you got to make changes. You got to be willing to do something. Otherwise, it's just going to get stuck. And then you're going to wind up forcing people to buy, cellular phones with FM chips in it and expect it to save the radio business.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion for those of you. Just sort of make sure we're all clear that it's my opinion. I'm just every time I read articles about the business and why things are dying, it's like, really, it's not the technology doing it.
No.
Yeah, I know. Well, as broadcast engineers, I think for the most part, the best thing we can do is make sure that we provide the best ways for broadcasters to get their signal out in a friction-free way, in a mass media kind of way. Make sure that we're there where everybody else is.
Uh-oh.
Did we lose Kirk?
Well, apparently my opinion must have annoyed somebody, so... Oh, I've been known to do that too many times. No, I'm only kidding. Oh, I guess, did we lose Kirk? I'm just checking. We're at the Network Operations Center. We'll look over to the big board. Oh, wow, look at that. It's blank. Well, anyway. So do you think the future with Dash, if you're, say...
whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable.
So we've discovered. Thank you for letting us know
Okay,
that.
then.
That's such a nice British sound. So
Speaking of voice interfaces.
Moving forward with Dash, if say in a perfect world, in the case maybe Wyoming Public Radio, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Don't I have it?
Wyoming Public Media.
Public Media, thank you.
Yeah.
You do all the right things. You say we're creative. We go out. We're going to experiment. We're going to do crazy stuff. You think the MPEG Dash approach would definitely be something you could benefit from? You could see it in the stations, the markets you're serving, and the audiences you're connecting with. Do you see that? Take advantage of that technology?
Yeah, I do actually. And one of the things that was brought up were the apps. And right now, the two big ones that are out there on these platforms are Pandora and iHeartRadio. But both Ford and GM have announced that they're going to have APIs available for stations to add their apps to this platform. So I could definitely see investigating that a little further, as well as providing all kinds of data to put into this platform, to offer listeners the best experience possible. So.
Okay, no, that's what I thought. So basically, we all agree that, and the chat room, I know they're all going crazy, and I probably stirred the pot a little bit and smacked that bee's nest, but I've just been known to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about making money and enjoying yourself and making things happen and and moving on in life. So one of the things I wanted to point out with Dash and other technologies that are coming around, and you pointed out succinctly, we got to be willing to, I'll just say as broadcasters, as a general statement, willing to take chances, take risks, find a way to make it work, because that's what we do. Whether you're building cars, tripods for a camera, that's what it goes. And so I just want to use an example. I was reading an article recently and talking to an entrepreneurial inventor about a technology. And if you can see this correctly, I hope people can. Those that are just watching, those listening, this is a light bulb I'm holding between my thumb and index finger. And that light bulb, the technology, the incandescent light, we'll say, I won't say this LED one. It took the inventor 1,000 tries, 1,000 failures before it became perfected. That inventor, Thomas Alva Edison. So, for those of you who don't think it's possible, it can happen, but failure is something you need to have. That's how you learn from it and make things happen. So, Shane, you were spot on about talking in that fashion. Oh, we have our guest. Is he back?
Kirk's back.
Hello, Kissimmee. Hello, Kissimmee. Are you online? Hello, caller. Caller from Kissimmee.
I'm here. I'm here. Can you?
Sorry, just reminding people of Larry King in the day on the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Am I on? Am I here?
You're on. You're live, and you're to the network.
Oh. Well, it sounds like you guys carried on quite well. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I guess we got to closely wrap it up, right? Oh no.
I had to put a couple more quarters in the hotel Viber bed to keep the Wi-Fi.
Aha.
This is the craziest resort internet. You have to re-log in every few hours.
Oh, it's a bandwidth cap. I see.
Well, no, I don't know. They just cut you off after a while.
No, it's your bandwidth, your time cap. It has nothing to do with the data bits. It's your time. Sorry.
Yes, it's
you've got 20 minutes. That's it. Anything you can do within 20 minutes. You can have 20 gigs if you like. Only 20 minutes worth.
Oh gosh. Hey, Shane, we've asked you a bunch of questions. Is there anything else at the Dash conference that's been going on that's caught your attention or you'd like to make sure we know about?
Oh my goodness, it was like I said, it was a full 2 days. My brain is full.
How bad.
Well, I'll tell you this. There was a lot of activity on Twitter throughout the conference. So the hashtag, if you want to go back and look at the conversations that we're having, was hashtag Dash Audio. And there's a lot of information there. But I think the takeaway from all this is that the dashboard is changing, and we as broadcasters have to adapt to it. And a big part of adapting is realizing that we're not just radio anymore. And this has been the case for quite a while now. We're not just radio. We are content producers, and that content has to be something that the consumers, the listeners, whatever you want to call them, want to actually listen to. We have to give them a reason to actually want to listen to our content.
Radio's always been content. It's never been broadcasters. A broadcaster is a farming tool that spreads seeds across the field. Okay, if you want to look up the term, so the seeds are the content. So we've always been content providers. We just lost sight of what we called it.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just stirring the bee's nest.
I see one tweet that Eric Rhodes made just some hours ago today. Don't blow out your morning guy for a national feed. Local is what we advertisers want from radio. It's your advantage. True?
I don't know. Check with Clear Channel. They have one guy across the country, right?
I don't know. I was at the Universal Studios today here in Orlando, and they have a radio station, as we mentioned earlier. They have two studios there, and they had two of the local Orlando Clear Channel stations operating from the studios today. One of them was WTKS, and I was pretty impressed with their morning shows. With their daytime talk shows on TKS. They weren't necessarily political. It was like kind of like some adults in The Simpsons all sitting around a table over lunch or dinner chatting about problems of the day. It was kind of interesting and rather compelling, I thought. I didn't know that this kind of program was going on. I should, but I certainly don't know anything about what's going on in radio. It was certainly different than, say, the Clear Channel stations that we have in Nashville, where they do a very adequate job of talking about mostly politics. But I felt this was kind of refreshing what TKS is doing, and that they were doing it live from Universal Studios as well, of course, part of the promotional there. Hey, the stations that I'm part owner of, some of them have a live local morning show, and some have a national act on the air. So I get where Eric's coming from. Don't do that. Almost seems necessary sometimes, but. So I'm sorry, Shane. You were telling us about. I know a lot happened in 2 days. Just looking at the tweets here on the Twitter feed with the hashtag Dash Audio. Anything else stand out in your mind from the last couple of days? Anybody that we should really watch and listen to who seemed to speak a lot of wisdom?
Well, I think it's going to be worth watching what's coming out from these various car manufacturers. I mean. Ford, GM, Toyota, they've all got their connected solutions out there right now, and they want these partnerships with content providers, and we have to be there. We have to be sure that we're providing what the customer wants. So.
All right. Well, more to come. And so is this conference over now? Was it 2 days?
It was a 2-day conference, yep.
Okay.
So it's just wrapped up today.
Hey, I would encourage folks to go to twitter.com and just search hashtag on Dash Audio, hashtag Dash Audio, and read what other people were saying about the Dash conference. Some photos got tweeted, and quite a bit of ideas, and plenty of good links there, too. Shane Toven has been our guest on This Week in Radio Tech. Shane is the Director of Engineering at Wyoming Public Media. Shane, and you're not only doing that, but you're also at this forward-thinking Dash conference in Detroit. Thanks for going there, and thanks for checking in with us. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. And Chris Tobin, live in studio in Queens at the GFQ Network. Thank you very much for heading out there and being on full HD for us.
No problem. I had a great time. Great topics.
Next week, our show, This Week in Radio Tech, will be at a special time, although I'm forgetting exactly what that time is. Is it 2 o'clock Eastern?
2 o'clock
Maybe Andrew
Eastern,
Zarian.
and it's on the 75th anniversary of the War of the Worlds broadcast, radio broadcast.
Ooh.
That's right.
Okay. It's on Halloween,
Yes.
2 o'clock Eastern time, and our guest from Comrex, Chris Crump. You may know him as the director of sales for Comrex, and a smart guy, has a lot of great ideas and can tell us what's going on in both audio and video remote connectivity. So Chris Crump will be our guest next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Our show this week has been brought to you by Telos and the Telos VX multi-line VoIP SIP phone system. It's where the world is going with telephony and built-in codecs in your phone system. Check it out at telos-systems.com/VX. All right. Thanks very much to Andrew Zarian at the GFQ Network for producing our show, to Andrew Tobin and Shane Toven. And we'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.
That's all the bandwidth we can pilfer this week. Another TWiRT has propagated, and all the transmitters and audio equipment live happily ever after, thanks to the handsome engineer and his kind, benevolent care. We'll be back next week.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
This Week in Radio Tech. Subscribe to iTunes and you'll never miss a show. Search for This Week in Radio Tech in the iTunes Store. Soliciting is strictly encouraged. If you like today's show, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, we were never here. Kirk Harnack's wardrobe provided by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross Disaster Relief Services. Hair and makeup provided by Penelope Garcia Hernandez Weinberg.
He's unique, wouldn't you say?
I just want to get it over with.
This ends this transmission. Tango, Whiskey, India, Romeo, Tango. Signing off. Okay.